Well, what do we have here? We have 2 boxes of quilted goodness, and these just showed up on my doorstep just a couple days ago, and I thought it would be fun to unbox them with you. I did have to go ahead and open them up and take out 2 because there's 2 in here I couldn't show, but I didn't look at the other ones in here. And we're just going to open them up and talk about these good quilts that I've got to show with you. If you watched right before Christmas, I sent off a number of quilt tops to David, my quilter, and these are the quilts back, and I think they're going to be really cool. He did show me photos as he was working on them. So I'm not completely in the dark, but I haven't seen them in person. So I'm going to unbox these, set them on my cutting table, but then we're going to open them up and take a look at them together. All right, we've got piles of quilty goodness to go through. I had my husband hang up the first quilt that we can look at here behind me. So you can see what this looks like bigger, and then I will pull it down to the cutting table and we'll look at the quilting on it. I think I'm going to love the quilting on all of these. I love the pictures that David sent and it was fun. I tried out some new quilting designs and it was really fun to see those as he was working on them. This is from the Moda Mystery box. If you want to watch that video, I'll link it below. In fact, if you want any of the actual quilt information, I'm just going to link to where I shared about the quilt tops so that you can look and get quilt top information, and then this video is going to be more about the quilting information. So this is this quilt in its entirety. I will move these other quilts off the cutting table. We're going to look at this one. The quilting is really good. I'm pretty sure you can't see what it looks like from back here, but you're going to be able to. So let me take that down for you. Here this little pretty is up close. The quilting on this is a really neat kind of echoed flower design, and I really like the way it looks, especially in all of this kind of negative space here. It shows up really nicely. For the backing, I used a Fireside Minky. This is from Moda, and I think that looks really nice. With the front of the quilt, a stripe for the binding, of course. I would use a stripe for the binding. And this is just going to make a really cozy quilt. This is one I will be giving away, and I think it's going to be just perfect. So the quilting design on this is called Bougie, and it's by Melissa Kelly. Just like with other videos where I share about the quilting information, I always provide the links to the quilting design that's used, so that if that's something that you want to have your long arm quilter use, or maybe you are a long arm quilter, you have that information handy. So there's the first one. Now behind me is the same quilt pattern, but in different fabrics. And the quilting on this is different, another new one that I hadn't used before, and it's really neat too. So you'll have to let me know if you like this quilt right here, or if you like the quilting on this one better, which of the quilting designs you prefer. I think they're both really pretty, and I would be hard pressed to say which one of those I like better. I think they both turned out really neat. Isn't that quilting design so pretty? It's called City of Fountains, and it's by Julie Hurt. And it's a rainbow, it's a Baptist clam, sort of. It kind of mixes some of my favorites, a clamshell, all together into one really pretty quilting design. The backing, I used the same as I did for the previous quilt, and see how that quilting shows up. I always think that quilting on minky type backings is so pretty. I think that's just beautiful. This color worked really well with these colors as well, and I think that's going to be just perfect. I'm giving this one away as well, and it's going to be a super snuggly perfect quilt. Behind me is another quilt that I'm going to be donating, and this is just a simple layer cake square quilt. And so I knew I wanted some really neat quilting because it's such a simple design. And I've had my eye on this quilting design for years, and I just never had a quilt that I thought that it was going to work well for. And so I was so excited to see how it looked, and I think it turned out beautifully. It's, well, let me just show it to you. See, you just had to see this quilting up close to appreciate it. I think it's just beautiful. It's these leaves, and then there's swirls and rainbows and more swirls all spread out across the whole quilt. The scale is nice and roomy, but it's just an interesting quilt design, and I think that's so pretty. I can see this working really well on a lot of these simpler quilts. Layer cake quilts, charm pack square quilts, anything where it's kind of simple and you don't have a lot of piecing that you want to overshadow by having too complex of a quilting design, I think this would be really pretty. It's called Modern Leaf. I used the same backing as I used on the first two quilts. The color of this is natural and it is Moda's Fireside fabric. It's a 60-inch wide minky type fabric, and because of that I purchased bolts of it because it works really nicely for these smaller size quilts. I don't have to piece backing and you just end up with this wonderfully drapey soft cozy quilt. So this is again Modern Leaf. It's a layer cake quilt and I love the way that turned out. Okay, well, would you look at that? I finally have my Oh Happy Day sampler quilt finished, bound, and ready to go. I know a lot of you had yours quilted and done long before I had mine done, so good job. If you don't yet have yours done, that's just fine. As you can see, it took me a little while to get mine done too, but I have it done now. I'm so happy with the way it turned out. I think the quilting is really pretty. It stumped me for a little bit because I wasn't sure what quilting design I wanted to use for this quilt, but I think this turned out just beautifully. This quilting is called Knit 1, Purl 2. It's by Natalie Gorman, and it's these fun little loops, echoed loops, I guess you would say, and I think it's so pretty. It adds a nice amount of texture to this quilt. The backing is more minky. This is a 90-inch wide minky. This quilt top was a lot wider than the last ones that I was showing, so I did need to go with a wider backing. And I have pieced minky once, I think, for a backing, and I don't prefer to do that again. So I always purchase as wide as I can and use an unpieced minky back. So that is the Oh Happy Day quilt. Now, if you were not familiar and didn't participate with this sew along, the information is still over on my blog. I will link to that set of videos that I shared here for this sew along. It was a lot of fun to do. We used blocks from my Oh Happy Day book, and I think it turned out really pretty. Now, speaking of quilt alongs that I've hosted, I have my Sunny Patches quilt hanging behind me, and it is finally done. This is another one that some of you finished ahead of me, which is wonderful. I'm always happy when you guys finish ahead of me, but encourage anyone who's not done yet. It is just fine. You just take your time. They get done when they get done. But this is Sunny Patches. This is in my Sunwashed line of fabric. And I also have my Beautiful Day version to show you next. So I got to choose two different quilting designs for these two quilts also. And here is the quilting on this one up close. The quilting design is called Happy Go Lucky by Melissa Kelly. Beautiful little flowers with sort of a loopy circle around them. And I think it's really pretty, especially in these larger white space areas. The quilting really shows up nicely here. If you haven't yet had your quilt quilted, something to think about is how that design is going to look in these sections. And I think that looks really pretty. We have that same white minky for the back of this one. And you can see that quilting there so nicely. Sun-washed fabrics do not have a stripe, so I used the little dot for the binding on this quilt. Now, we'll just look back behind me here. You can see the Beautiful Day version, which I love this one too. Again, since we have two quilts with two different quilting designs, you'll have to let me know which quilting you prefer. The one on the sun-washed quilt here on my cutting table, or the Beautiful Day version hanging back behind me here. I don't know which one I like better. I think they both very nicely complement the quilt patterns as well as the fabrics that I chose for each of these quilts. So I'd be hard pressed to say which one I like better. We'll take this down and I'll get your opinion on which you like better. The quilting on this is cross-hatched clamshells, and it is just a wonderful clamshell with crosshatches, as the name implies. And those are two of my favorite things. I love a good traditional crosshatch, and clamshells, you just can't go wrong. So this combination of the two I think is beautiful. Again, you can see in that white space there how nicely that quilting design shows up. The backing is the same on this one, that white minky, and see, isn't it so pretty on the back? Quilting just always looks so striking on a minky back. I think that's beautiful. You could almost do a double-sided minky quilt with just the quilting. Wouldn't that be pretty? I've never thought about doing that, but that would be really stunning. Just a two-sided minky quilt. I don't know how heavy that would be, or even if you'd put batting in there, that'd be one cozy quilt though. But the quilting would be so pretty. Anyhow, that's what that looks like on the back. Oh, the striped binding. Beautiful Day does have a stripe, so I used a stripe for the binding on this one. So which do you think? Did you like the crosshatched clamshells quilting or the one right before this on the Beautiful Day Sunny Patches quilt? Like I said, that's a hard one for me to choose between the two. I think they're both really pretty. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this fun little unboxing. It was fun for me to see these quilts for the first time with all of you. I'm so happy with how they all turned out. I like all of the quilting designs. Sometimes, I've mentioned this before, I'll choose something and I will think, I wish I had chosen something a little bit different, but I really like the way all of these came together. I think they are just beautiful, and I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I'll catch you again next time.